This is a gap down situation, and it's interesting in how it looks. Uh, if you haven't picked up on it yet, there are many. There are probably about a dozen uh, pattern shapes in the proximity group pattern when it comes to gaps for location patterns when we have gaps up. When we have gaps down, like this situation, there is a much greater variety of examples to pick up on. One of the things that you can use is a larger time frame chart, like the weekly chart, when you're looking at daily charts to make determinations for gaps. And in this example here, I am in ORLY, and this big red candle on the end, as you can see from the data window on the right, is July 5, 2017. And so on the 3rd of July, in between, the vertical green candle is Friday, June 30th, 2017. And this vertical green candle coincides with on the weekly chart with the vertical green candle over here on the weekly chart. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the daily chart and the general theme that runs through it. A simple glance across all 5 charts will tell us that we're in a high M pattern. We also can see from the trend chart that we're in a higher right peak pattern. And that does not necessarily is not necessarily seen on the powered Zion line, because that one is in divergence. But it does show up on the swing and the zip line. And I haven't checked the price line. Price red on the left peak is at 98.33. And price red is 104. So we're higher on the price. The right peak is higher of the high M on the price chart as well. In this case, both peaks are price red, and this will the one thing that you know after you've had experience with the indicators is that when you have flat top peaks on high M patterns, like you see here in the price red or in the zip red, it becomes very evident. When you have those, they are obviously a depiction of a next day down pattern, and so on the vertical green line that we see over here on the price, zip, and swing charts, this day on the vertical green line would be July 3rd, 2017, and we have a low angle up, as I mentioned. This low angle we will often see in the reverse pattern with a W with low angle down on the left leg and a low angle up on the right leg. And that is a strong indication for a downtrend, or excuse me, a next day. Those are, when the W's are next day ups, the high M's are nothing more than a W upside down, and it's obviously a next day down. Some will struggle for a signal, and because if you're over here on this day here, which is the same day as the other 2 vertical lines, then you you have to ask yourself, am I looking at the top of the high-M peak, or is there going to be one more day? And sometimes it's a decision that you just have to make relative to the indications or the indicators that you see. And by that I mean you've got over here on the daily chart, you have red is up touching yellow and green is up touching pink. So the first thing you want to say or think is that, well, it could be another day of a continuation. But when you look down here in the power chart, you can see that the power pink has not yet crossed over and above the power orange like the other lines are. And so when that happens, there's a good probability that it may go on for more than one day. When you recognize the fact over here in the weekly chart that you have on the trend red, you have an up-touched green. Now, again, this vertical line in the weekly chart is June 30th, and that corresponds with the other two vertical lines right now. We also have an uptouch in power Zion, uptouching the 0. We have in the zip chart, we have it's a non-qualifying peak, but it is a red peak with zip yellow at 4.7 and zip red at 16.5. And so it's kind of an influencing factor, but it's not necessarily, we wouldn't necessarily identify it as a peak. But obviously when we see the other up touches, then there's a good indication that that's what it is. The other big one is swing yellow is running into the blue line, and the blue line is significantly lower than the green line. And again, if you're familiar with what the blue line is, that's a crossover indicator. When it's running under green, you're in a downtrend. When it's running above red, you're in an uptrend. But yellow crosses over both green and red before the blue line. But originally, when we created the indicator, the blue line was the crossover indicator. But as you know, the blue line, swing blue and swing gray are the two special use lines within the whole system. And so we use them for their use. One of the things that we can see from the weekly chart, and obviously at this point, the indication is, the ability to know what's going to happen in the following week is conveyed right here on the most powerful probably is the trend red up touching the trend green, and the fact that it's in that W pattern, that falling W pattern, because when you have a W pattern like that, the obvious direction is going down. And so what I'm trying to say here is that you're using the weekly chart to identify the gap down. And you don't, on a weekly chart, it's not going to be a gap down, it's going to be a go down. We don't know that it's going to be a gap down until we actually see it here on the daily chart. But we do know that it's going to go down. And so on this day, on June 30th, that would have been that would have been Friday, of what we see right here. To capture a high point, it closed right here at 218.74. And so in theory, you could have taken a part position in a short position on June 30th. Over here, the next day, this would have been Monday, July 3rd. The high and the low was the high was 220 and the low was 217. And so again, you could have taken a short position on this day, even a couple dollars better than the day before, knowing that in the weekly example we are going to go down. On this day here, the down or the gap down occurred in the daily chart within the trend example. And by that I mean we had a trend green, uptouch yellow, and that was our indication for a next day down. So it was physically on this day that we spotted the gap down in the daily trend chart, trend green specifically, but we knew that it was coming based on the weekly chart. And so what I'm obviously trying to convey here is that you need to use all of your tools that are available for you, because they will just give you a lot of information through these indicator lines, be it daily charts or weekly charts. Some people trade at different, like on the 15-minute chart or the hourly chart. Obviously, you want to look at a larger frame chart to do the same thing. So this is a gap down example. It's you might say it really became, when you glance at it, you go, bam, that's a high M pattern. It's going down. It's real easy to see. But you don't know which day it is. But you're not going to get hurt by, on the first day when it opens up, taking a position, as I just described in how one might effectively trade the situation, because you know it's coming down. Sometimes it's not going to go down till Thursday of the week, and I've seen it go down. I remember one I was watching a long time and holding a position on, and it took. It was an up. It was theoretically a gap up, and on the 2-minute chart, about probably 12 to maybe 14 minutes before the closing bell on Friday, we had several large candles on the 2-minute chart. It just went boom, 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 and it was, the end result was like a gap up, but it did not occur until those last few minutes of the closing bell. So when you know something's going to happen, hang in there. The indicators, unless you're misreading the indicators do not lie. So this is an example of using the weekly chart very effectively to maintain and identify a short position.